JoJo here. So episode 1 ended up going longer than we anticipated, so it was split into 2 parts. This is part 2, where we will be discussing the cards released in Bloomburrow, and we'll be discussing our favorite cards, interesting ways to use the mechanics, and how everything is going to interact. So sit back and enjoy. So I'm not going to go into every card, but I will discuss a couple of cards that I thought were very interesting. Some cards that you would probably consider sleepers that aren't getting as much attention because they're not necessarily rare. Some of them are rare and some of them are uncommon and common. But I'll also be talking a little bit about the actual mechanics that are happening in Bloomburrow, which I think are interesting. And thinking of Mabel at the end there, the first of these mechanics is Offspring.
Yes, that's a great one. I'm very much looking forward to trying that out.
Yeah, you're planning of actually purchasing the Offspring
Commander deck. Yes, I am.
So Offspring is really interesting, and an ability I think can be very powerful with the use of token decks. So one of the cards that I think is interesting is called Manifold Mouse, and it is a red mouse soldier. It's a creature. It has a cost of 1 and a red, and it has the ability we just spoke of, which is Offspring 2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target mouse you control gains your choice of Double Strike or Trample until end of turn. So Double Strike is a very powerful ability, and what Offspring will do is, it says Offspring 2, which means you pay 2 mana as you cast the card. So where Manifold Mouse is 1 in red, you'll cast it, and then you'll also pay its Offspring of 2 mana, so it'll cost 3 in a red total. And when it's cast, you will make a token copy of Manifold Mouse, or the card in question, except it will be a 1/1. So it'll be the exact same, the card will be the same, but its power and toughness will just be 1/1. The thing about that is some cards can have very powerful abilities, or they might have entered the battlefield effects. And when you have something on a token, tokens can be copied very easily and populated. Populate is an ability that allows you to make copies of a token. So the idea is you make tokens of these things, and then you can expand your board and get loads of value from making tokens of all these effects.
It's also super cute to boot.
Yeah, the tokens that they have released are just adorable, because what this represents is that it's the child version of this card, or like it's the offspring.
We've actually pulled a couple of the Offspring tokens.
Yes.
That is my one kind of concern with it, and it's why I specifically want to get the commander deck for this pre-constructed. Because if you get the Offspring for a particular card, you then have to try and get that card, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's going to be easier buying the pre-constructed deck that has those included, as opposed to going, oh, I hope I pull these 2 cards together, than it is saying like, oh, I just need the single card.
Now, that's interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of people were complaining about the tokens in the pre-release, given that tokens aren't guaranteed, and sometimes you get an ad in your packs. It's outside of the normal amount of cards you get anyways. It's always a free slot, but you have the chance of getting a token, an art card, or an ad.
The ads are so annoying.
Yeah.
I'm already playing the game.
I'm already playing the game. I'm already buying packs. There's no point of advertising to me. It's pointless. But Mark Rosewater, one of the designers on Magic the Gathering, Mark Rosewater actually came out and said, we know it's an issue with tokens, and especially with the Offspring mechanic. We are looking into it, and we're trying to provide a fix for it. So we don't know what that will entail in future, given that Hasbro is top dog in they're the owners, and they like money. I can easily see them releasing an extra booster pack that has all the tokens or something in it, or
I guess
a token pack.
I mean, what I was thinking, it kind of ruins the random nature of the pack, and it wouldn't work from a production standpoint. But if you had a specific check being like, oh, this card in this pack has Offspring, we need to make sure that the corresponding token is in there, doesn't really work.
They can specify to have a certain card in a pack. I don't know how it works exactly. I don't work at Wizards or know anyone that works at Wizards. maybe someone listening to this that does know can confirm or deny. But like every pack does have an R&D, but it's all done through an algorithm. I would imagine it's not that hard for them to, when the algorithm is generated, add a token. But the thing in my head that doesn't work in that regard is what happens if you get a card that has, or when you get multiple cards that have offspring,
That's true. Yeah, that's another good
or
point.
multiple cards that need tokens. So which one does it? Is it random which one you get?
Yeah, this is also a set that more so than previous has multiple tokens to choose from. So, for example, in a previous Innistrad set, where the main conceit was vampires,
Yeah.
it was all vampiric themed. You were either going to get a blood token or a bat token, and those were the two.
Well, there was a couple actually. There was, from top of my head, there was blood tokens, there was vampire tokens, there was wolf token, human token, soldier token,
and spirit
as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
But the other
and
thing
zombies.
was a lot of those were reversed. So if you got or if you got the blood token on one side, you probably had the spirit on the reverse side. That doesn't seem to be the case for the offspring tokens, where they're just single-sided.
Offspring token, that's in your regular play booster. You
That's
normally
true.
only get double-sided tokens in a precon commander deck or in the collector booster.
That's fair. That's fair.
Offspring, really interesting mechanic. There is a bit of a problem with tokens, and hopefully we'll see some future fix. I imagine it's going to cost money, but we'll see. Now, we mentioned this card earlier on, and this actually shows another of the new mechanics in Bloomburrow, which is the card that had
Maha.
Raha.
Maha.
Sorry, Maha.
Like you're about to laugh very evilly. Exactly.
Dawn's Truce, which is an instant spell. It is a 1 and a white, 1 generic mana and a white, and it has gift a card. We'll go into that in a second.
Oh yes, I forgot about this mechanic. Good.
Yeah, gift a card. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. So permanents you control gain hexproof. That's already really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Now the next part of this is if the gift was promised, permanents you control also gain indestructible until end of turn. So that's already pretty great. So this is a heroic intervention, which is a very expensive card when it's not reprinted. Like I remember heroic intervention being as high as like €36 at some points, and I think it's maybe less now. I think it's like less than a fiver, unless it's starting to climb again. But it goes to show that the effect is quite powerful, and it costs 3 mana, if I remember correctly. I think I might be mixing that up with Teferi's Protection, but yeah, Dawn's Truce, 2 mana, 1 and white, and if a gift was promised, you get heroic intervention. The gift in this case is called gift a card. And the way these mechanics work, like the gift mechanic, is when you cast a card, you can promise an opponent a gift as you cast it. If you do, they draw a card before its other effects. In this case, that's because it says gift a card. But it might say gift food, which might make a food token. It might say gift a fish, or
yes,
it's just specifically a fish.
Specifically a fish.
Yeah. Which I think is hilarious, which is like, gift a fish. Your opponent gets a 1/1 fish token. Like, and I think it was for an R, so the R is they're giving you a fish. But normally the card will do one thing, and if you pay the gift cost, which is basically like another form of kicker, because everything is kicker, the cards get better basically. And I think for an ability this strong, for 2 mana, having an opponent draw a card, honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And it is a story spotlight showing Mabel giving the egg to Maha. So
yes, there is actually another card that has gift.
There's a few of them.
Which is again story relevant, which is called Cruel Claw's Heist.
Okay.
Which shows Cruel Claw stealing the egg.
Oh,
and that is
I haven't seen that.
That is 2 black mana. Gift a card. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. Exile that card. If the gift was promised, you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and the mana of any type can be spent to cast it.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, just showing that the gift mechanic can be used in multiple ways.
Yeah, Sticking with mice so far, we have another card, and this is very specific to mice in Bloomburrow, I believe. So another mechanic that will show up is one called Valiant, which I think is interesting for low to the ground decks that like to attack a lot, basically. So the card I thought was interesting is Ember Heart Challenger, which is a 1 and a red. It is a creature again, Mouse Warrior. It's a 2/2. It has haste, that's already great. Prowess, which prowess makes a return. This was a mechanic that was first introduced in, it might actually be introduced in an old set. The first time I came across it was in Cons of Takir. And prowess basically means whenever you cast a non-creature spell, that creature gets +1/+1 on turn. Not counters, just it gets a temporary boost in strength. So any decks that have a lot of spells, low cost spells, being able to cast spells for free, it allows you to very easily boost up a creature very quickly. So powerful ability, very aggressive in its strategy. So having something with haste goes really well with that. It is a 2-drop, which means you can cast it early turn or early on, possibly a turn 1. And then we have Valiant. So Valiant, I believe, is different for each card, but on Ember Heart Challenger, it reads, whenever Ember Heart Challenger becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. So one of the problems that decks that use this strategy have is they run out of cards to cast. They run out of steam. They run out of things they can do. They might have the mana. They might be going semi-infinite. But when you run out of cards and things to cast, then that's it. You can't do anything else. The fact that Ember Heart Challenger has on it that, unfortunately, it is only for the first time each turn. You may exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card. You still have to pay the cost, but it's basically card draw. There is ways around the first time each turn. For example, if a card becomes a copy, if you make a token of it and you can then target the token, that card is the first time it was targeted. You can also, I believe this is how this works, but I believe you can also flicker a spell. A flickering spell means it would leave the battlefield and re-enter the battlefield. There's a number of spells and abilities that let you do that. And that'll then trigger a new instance of first time each turn, so it doesn't count a card from before. So I think that's an interesting card that's coming up. I love the art on it as well. It's a little mouse holding a staff and a flaming sword.
Yes, I believe if you've seen the animated trailer for Bloomburrow, that is the main mouse in the trailer.
Oh, it might be. Yeah. I assumed it was Mabel, but probably.
Mabel is in the trailer.
I think it's a child.
No, that's a different character.
Oh,
Mabel is very distinctive because she always has a little bow at the end of her tail.
Oh, yeah. That's really cute.
It is super cute. It's one of her defining characteristics is the little bow.
Yeah, and we'll post an image of any card we talk about here.
Of course, of course. Speaking of the images of the cards, and you mentioned that the art on this is beautiful, some of the full arts and borderless arts for these cards are absolutely stunning.
Yeah, like the Manifold Mouse that we talked about earlier, we actually have a full art version that we pulled.
Yes.
Sorry.
It's a showcase art.
Showcase art, yeah. And it's by Chuck Grebe. I think it's Grebe. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but the art on it is done by Chuck Grebe, and again, it looks absolutely amazing. The whole card looks stunning. I love the border they have on it, which is like,
it has like fairy tale vibes to it, like a storybook.
Yeah, it has kind of storybook vibes to it, and also shows like a lot of nature with leaves and plants and stuff along the side.
And controversial opinion, hot take here, I prefer these to the anime raised foil arts.
Quote unquote anime.
Quote unquote anime. They are,
they're animated.
They look a lot cleaner. They look a lot more chibi, for lack of a better term. They're still really, really good arts. Like the one of Mabel in particular, and the one of Zoraline, and another card which is Mura, the trash tactician, who is a
that sounds like a raccoon.
It is raccoon, yes.
Okay.
Raccoon warrior. They all look great, but I don't know. There's something about the arts for the showcase cards. There's like an edge to them, which I love.
I do I do like the showcase cards, but I am a really big fan of the anime cards.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, showcase you can get in the normal play boosters,
Yes,
so that's nice.
they're the
That
ones that
means
you're more likely to get.
well, the only ones you're going to get in a play booster.
I mean, between the showcase and the full arts, the borderless. Pardon me.
The anime cards are only available in the collector boosters,
Yes, but
which collector boosters, given the name, they're more expensive. They have more rares, more
yeah,
foils.
yeah. There also don't seem to be as many of the raised foils. At least in the list that we will be linking in the show notes, there are only 13 raised foils, and there are 42 showcase arts.
Yeah,
Because those include cards like Dawn's Truce, which we discussed before. It's just an alternate artwork of that, but it also has one of my favorite depictions of King Glarb, whose card name is Glarb Calamity's Augur. The original art for him is great. It's very regal, but there's something about this showcase art where he looks so like wizen and pathetic.
yeah.
I really, really enjoy it. Like this is a card that I can see like, oh, this is a man who believes he is in the right.
Also, it looks like that the showcase arts for Glarb and Helga actually make one full image.
Which I love.
Speaking of collector boosters, actually, guest cards, which
Oh yes.
these are reprints, typically reprints of older cards. And there's one particular reprint that we got that has very few reprints, actually, is Sylvan Tutor. Sylvan Tutor has finally got another reprint. It is a special guest art card, but just of note, we finally have a reprint of it and brings the price down a tiny bit.
Watching the prices of Magic cards is like keeping an eye on the stock market.
It is a stock market.
Yeah.
Which I will.
You know, if a card has gone up in value, it's been mentioned on like game nights.
Oh, like the
Thalarian University.
There is a thing called the command zone effect, which is a YouTube channel that talks about Magic. And one of the things that happens is they kind of showcase sets early on, or like they have their game nights series or extra turns, which is where they play a game of Commander. They are specifically for the Commander format. But normally people will see them on the show and see, oh, wow, that was really powerful. Or in this game, one of the hosts or one of the guests or whatever won the game because of this card. They can see how powerful they end up. And a lot of people will then start buying it. And it's always a case of supply and demand. Once a card starts selling really well and supply starts going down, price starts going up.
Yeah.
So that has been noted as the command zone effect. They have addressed this before, and they have talked about wanting to trying to avoid it a little bit. But it is unintentional sometimes that it can happen. So yeah, moving on. We want to kind of wrap this up soon enough. So I think one of the other unique ones I wanted to talk about is on squirrels, which
yes, because squirrels were a pre-existing kindred within Magic already. They're just getting a bit of a boost.
They're getting a bit of a boost, and the other thing is a mechanic called Forage. So Curious Forager. It is
aptly named.
Yep. It is a squirrel druid. Lovely little creature. It costs 2 generic and a green. It is a 3/2, 3 power, 2 toughness. As when Curious Forager enters, actually another point I want to make here. When Curious Forager enters, which now they've updated Bloomburrow to change some of the effects, how they're worded.
ETB effects.
Yeah. It used to specify when a card name enters the battlefield. Now it has shortened it down to just enters. So
you see this a lot with Magic sets where the more specific terms are used, those terms will cut down on the amount of words used in the card. So, for example, a very well-known mechanic within Magic is Mill, which involves you forcing your opponents to remove cards from the top of their library and put them in the graveyard. And old cards that have this mechanic say that verbatim. Your opponent takes X amount of cards from the top of their library and puts them in their graveyard.
A bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, now the card. Yeah, now it just says your opponent mills X amount of cards. We all know what that means.
Long-term players do know what that means. but it's what's called an evergreen mechanic. So they try not to make too many evergreen mechanics because
Yes.
new players will then have to learn those keywords. So it is a bit more challenging for new players having a card that just says target player mills 2.
I mean, it's also the same for existing players like us, where during the Doctor Who set, a mechanic returned, that being suspend, and I didn't know what any of that meant.
Sometimes they don't explain cards, especially in sets like Commander, and it is a bit more difficult for entering the hobby. But typically, you'll enter a bit with some friends, and there is always people there to teach you.
Yes.
It's very rare that someone's going to get into Magic and not have someone to actually play the game with or
Yeah.
talk with.
Especially if you're playing at a local game store. Typically, the staff are well versed in any new mechanics coming out, and they will be available to advise and assist.
Yeah, so yeah, they try not to make too many evergreen mechanics, but mill is one of those evergreen mechanics.
Similar with enter now being
Yeah,
used.
so now it's rather than enters the battlefield, it just says enters because there really is nowhere else that's entering. Like when old cards used to say, when target creature is sent to the graveyard from the battlefield or from anywhere, now it's basically like if a card will go to the graveyard from the battlefield, it just says dies.
Yep.
If this creature dies, if an opponent creature dies, that just means if this card will be put into the graveyard. Whenever you see the word enters, it is specifically saying enters the battlefield. So when Curious Forager enters, you may forage, the new mechanic I mentioned. When you do, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So to forage, whenever something says forage, it means you can exile 3 cards from your graveyard, or you can sacrifice a food. Typically, food is a token that a lot of cards in Magic make. And food allows you to pay mana, tap it, sacrifice the token, and then you get, if I remember correctly, it was gain 3 life. In my opinion, food isn't the most useful token to have in the game. It is nice to get that little bit of 3 life, but to the most part, unless you have a bunch of cards that are benefiting from food, it's not normally run unless just tokens in general is something you care about. But with the introduction of forage, especially in the squirrels, it makes having a food token much better. Because just sacrificing a single food for an effect off a forage card will be extremely useful. Like for example, there was one that was which was tap forage, which we now know is exile 3 cards from your graveyard, sacrifice food. Um, Add 2 mana in any combination of colors. So that's pretty powerful. To get 2 mana, it basically means that your food is sort of a treasure token, uh, but sort of better.
I would say it's better.
Well, it specifically only works with that card. Like the card still has to tap,
Yeah.
but it's generating 2 mana. It's basically using your food to generate 2 mana.
I'm excited about this because it means, one, we're going to see a lot more food based decks.
I do want to see more food-based decks just because I want to play with the mechanic a little bit.
Exactly. And two, it means food's getting used in a more interesting way.
Actually, speaking of food and forage, another card that I thought was really interesting, which is actually a common card in the set, is Corpseberry Cultivator.
Which is a raccoon, yes?
No, it's
No?
another
Oh, so
squirrel.
another squirrel, pardon.
Yeah, Squirrel Warlock.
Yes, yes, yes.
Corpseberry Cultivator is one and hybrid, what's called Golgari mana, which is black or green. So it's one Golgari, or one black or green. Not confusing.
Just means you've got options.
In standard, it means it can go in a mono black or a mono green deck.
Yeah.
In Commander, it still has to go into a Golgari deck or a black green deck. But if you don't have green, you can still cast it. But it's another creature, Squirrel Warlock, and it has at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may forage. And we know what that does now.
Yep.
Whenever you forage, put a 1 counter on Corpseberry Cultivator. So if you are running a deck that's really playing into the forage mechanic, this card can get very out of hand. Because you're going to forage at the beginning of combat on your turn anyways.
Mm.
That doesn't technically give you any additional benefits, but anytime you forage with one of your other cards, you're going to get a 1 counter on the Corpse Berry Cultivator.
Yes.
And it is a May ability for the combat trigger, so you don't have to sacrifice.
Yeah, it's by your discretion.
Yeah, so it is only a common, but I think it's really interesting to have. It's technically also a sack outlet for any decks that care about sacrifice.
Which I believe the new Squirrel decks do.
Yeah. Um, Specifically only sacrificing food, but it is a
Right.
food sacrifice outlet.
But it also means, I think, because this is a common card, it's very likely to get overlooked
Yeah,
because it's a 2/3. It's a common. It doesn't cost a lot of mana, so you're likely to get it out early game. But this could really pop off.
it could. Yeah, I could see this easily becoming a very strong threat. That honestly, no one's going to waste removal on this thing
Exactly.
until it is a problem.
Yeah, removal is typically uh, used for things that are perceived as threats outright.
Yeah, and the last mechanic we're going to get into. Pretty sure this will cover all the unique mechanics
I
in
believe so,
Bloomburrow.
yeah. I don't think frogs have anything particular going on.
They're very powerful, but they don't have anything particular, I don't think.
No.
If I've missed something, we'll be linking an article by Wizards
Yes.
explaining all the new mechanics, anyways.
Because there are a lot of new and existing creature types that need to be considered here. We're touching on the main ones, but yeah, we'll link to the Lizards article. The Lizards article? The Wizards article.
Well, speaking of lizards, we are going to be getting to that shortly. But
yes.
First, we're going to talk about a mechanic that's mostly seen on raccoons.
Mm.
I haven't seen anything super powerful from it yet.
This, to me, strikes as a mechanic that will need to wait a few days until people are putting it into practice, and then we'll see how viable it truly is in the long run.
For this set, I don't think it's not a great mechanic in this set, in my opinion. But I think for future sets, I think it leaves a lot of design space for people or for Wizards to play with. And we'll just kind of get into it now for a second. One of the cards that has this mechanic on it that I'll be talking about, which I think could be interesting, is Hoarder's Overflow, which is an enchantment that costs 1 and a red. When Hoarder's Overflow enters, and whenever you expend 4, put a stash counter on it. So expend is you expend 4 as you spend your 4th total mana to cast spells during a turn. So from what I read from this is that whenever you have spent 4 mana in a turn casting spells, you will have the expend ability.
Yeah. So that means, if you cast a card that is 2 mana and then you cast another card that is 3, you have expended your 4th mana in casting that second card.
Yeah. And the thing about this is that if you have multiple abilities of this on the battlefield, they'll all trigger when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting. So like one cast of a spell where 4 mana is spent will trigger everything. And I'll get more into what design space they could go into, but I'll continue reading the card.
Yep.
And the rest of the card reads, pay 1 and a red, sacrifice Hoarder's Overflow, discard your hand, then draw cards equal to the number of stash counters on Hoarder's Overflow.
Yeah.
So that, in my opinion, is quite powerful. Like you could potentially have quite a few stash counters on it from straight up like just casting spells once each turn. So it is during a turn.
Mm.
So it means that on each player's turn, you can, if you spend 4 mana, you'll get the effect.
That's true. I hadn't considered that.
So there is a potential, like especially if you have cards that untap your lands or anything like that, and you're casting spells at instant speed,
burn spells,
anything like that. This can trigger on every player's turn. But also, if you do an effect called Proliferate, which is anything that puts more counters on something, you can probably rack up a lot of counters on this card. So I think it's going to be an overlooked spell that uses the expend mechanic.
Yeah.
And in Commander, you only have 1, but it's easy to make copies of it. And in Standard, like you can have 4 of this in your deck. and that means you'll have 4 triggers putting counters on. It benefits anything that says counters going onto a permanent. I think it has a lot of deck building potential.
Yeah. Another good example of the expend mechanic is a card we mentioned earlier, which is Mora Trash Tactician, which is a creature card, a raccoon warrior. And she actually has 2 expend effects.
Okay.
So whenever you expend 4, you gain 3 life. And as we established, that's when you cast your 4th mana in playing a card.
3 life's not bad.
Yeah. Whenever you expend 8, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until end of your next turn, you may play those cards.
Until the end of your next turn?
Yes.
That's actually really good.
Which means it'll do a full rotation back to you.
Yeah.
And then it's only at the end of that turn. Now, this is provided that you have the mana to play them, but for example, as
you still have to pay the cost.
You still have to pay the cost. But as we mentioned, you can use expend on anybody's turn.
You do this in someone's end phase.
Mm-hmm.
Or another opponent's end step just before your turn.
Exactly. Now, 8 mana is a bit steep. That really does seem like a late game play.
Well, you're not paying that much mana to do the effect.
No.
You're spending that much mana to cast something or do something.
And then the effect happens.
And the effect just happens anyways.
No, I just mean Mora is 1 red and a green.
Okay.
So she is essentially a 3-drop. You could potentially get her out quite early on, but it would take you a little while to build up your mana pool to 8.
In red and green, it would not take that long at all.
Well, that's fair, I suppose.
In standard, and if you're playing this at like any drafts in the future, yes, it'd be kind of difficult to get this up and running. I don't think it would be very viable in draft, to be honest.
She is a legendary creature, which if you're unfamiliar, in the Commander format, which is the format that we both predominantly play, you select a legendary creature to be the commander of your deck. That means you can always bring them online, provided that you have the mana to do so and you're willing to pay whatever increased cost may come about if they've already been put on the field. So I can fully see Mira becoming a raccoon commander if somebody wanted to specifically make a raccoon kindred deck.
I don't know if there's enough raccoons right now, at least.
It's interesting you say that because her initial ability, before we even get to expend, is at the beginning of your first main phase, add red or green for each raccoon you control.
Oh, well, that makes Mira a lot better.
That makes getting expend 8 a lot easier.
Yeah, I could see it working.
Now, the card that you were talking about, that's a red card, right?
It is red,
just red? Yeah. So yeah, you would be able to use that in a Mura-led commander deck.
Yeah. Well, raccoons for Bloomburrow are red, green.
Yeah.
So each of the creature types in Bloomburrow have a color
associated, as we touched on in the story. Yeah.
Yeah, because red and green can generate a lot of mana. Red generates fast mana in the moment, like straight away, and you have to kind of spend straight away. And green has a lot of what's called ramp. Ramp means that you have more mana to spend on your turn than you would if you were just playing a single land card per turn. And in the game of Magic, lands create mana.
Yeah. We'll have showcased a number of land cards throughout this video by now, I'm sure.
Yeah. But what's interesting on Mura is the fact that it says expend 8.
Yeah, she's the only raccoon card that we've seen in this set that has 2 expend. Everything else is expend 4.
Yes, but it also means that expend does not have to be 4. It could be 3, it could be 5.
Oh, so you mean there are chances in the future to expand on expend?
Yes. See what you did there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it means in future that Wizards, with this mechanic, will be able to design stuff. I think Bloomburrow is going to be a bit of a playtest for them, see like how it actually...
The door is open for...
future design.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see them making cards in the future that might be expend 6 or expend 2 even.
It's interesting that this is a mechanic associated with raccoons.
Yeah, I think in the lore, raccoons recycle.
Yes.
So like they kind of recycle everybody's rubbish and reuse things.
They're trash pandas.
Yeah, which kind of fits into that theme because expend is like it's used. You're using the mana to do other things on your turn. But these raccoons are getting an effect from that. They're reusing it.
That makes sense.
Reusing the spent mana, so they're recycling it.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
So yeah, I don't think currently in standard, especially in drafts, I don't think expend is going to be the most useful.
But in Commander, it definitely could be.
Yeah, I think it's going to have a lot of design space in Commander, and I haven't seen the full deck list for the Raccoon Commander deck.
Oh yes, because there is one coming out.
Get trash, do smash, is it?
I believe that's the tagline. Yeah.
Yeah. So there might be more expansion on the design of expand.
Yeah. So there are
Extend. Sorry.
There are 4 decks coming out.
Yeah.
There is the Bird Commander, which is an Offspring deck. That's the one that I'm most interested in, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
There's the Raccoon deck. There's a Squirrel deck.
Yeah, it's a Squirrel deck, but like it's basically a token deck.
Yeah. And then there's the Rabbit deck, which I don't know too much about.
It's very much group hug and 1/1 counters.
And by group hug, we mean
in Commander or any multiplayer format, group hug typically is that's kind of like a play style where you design your deck to make everyone on the table happy. So like
that's one way of phrasing it.
You're sitting there just like, oh yeah, I have this card on my field. That means we all draw extra cards. Everyone loves drawing cards. It's like I'm benefiting you. I'm doing good things for you. Don't attack me. Like they're getting value, but typically you're getting just a little bit more value. You try to pit the players against each other as much as possible.
Yeah, you become less of a target because you are benefiting your opponents.
And you're actually stockpiling all your resources. It's one of my favorite ways to play now, because if you make yourself not seem like a target, because the way most people lose is they become too big too early on, too much of a threat, and they get taken out. But if you're there waiting until the very end, you're benefiting everyone, but you're also gathering your own resources, building up your own board, and doing things to build yourself up. When it's down to the last player, the stuff you're hanging on to are like these really powerful ending cards, like finisher cards. Then on the last person, you just
lay waste,
go all out of nowhere, and they're like, oh my god.
Yeah, you say that the objective of a group hug deck is to make everybody happy, but I am never filled with more anxiety unless there is a group hug deck in play, because I know it's just going to make my opponents bigger and stronger.
Makes you bigger and stronger too, though.
A little bit. Group hug has never worked out for me.
But another thing about Commander is Commander games typically take a long time.
They do. They go for multiple hours.
They can do. And what I like about group hug is typically if someone can get their strategy off early game, it means that that game's over and you can get on to the next game.
Yeah, it does speed the process up a bit.
The more games you can get, I find the more fun. So it's why I've been vibing with group hug recently. But that aside, we should probably get back to the cards that we want to talk about. I mean, I had a list of a selection of cards that I thought were really noteworthy. Yeah. Again, this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying these are the best cards in the entire set or anything like that. These are cards that I think might be useful in the future. And from building over 100 commander decks, if not more, I can kind of see when I think a mechanic might be synergistic with a deck that I have built or will build. But keep in mind, this is more so geared towards the commander format. But some of these will be useful in draft and sealed and standard as well, which if you're not sure what those formats are, you can see those on the Magic Gathering website as well. So all the rules, resources, how to play, that's all up there. So, and most game stores, if you want to start playing, will actually give you an intro deck. I don't know how generous our local game store is, but
mileage may vary.
Yeah, depends who's your store and if they're like a premium store, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so some of the cards that I've picked out, we haven't really talked about any frogs.
We should talk about some frogs more.
Yeah, and a couple of the frogs that I have found have been one called Lily Splash Mentor, which is a frog druid. It is a creature again. It is 2 green and a blue, and as we discussed, frogs are typically Simic or green-blue. It has reach. This is a tip for any draft players or doing draft for Bloomburrow. Cards that have evasion are very powerful. Typically, they're very hard to deal with. So reach is very beneficial. This is an uncommon card as well. So typically, you get 3 or 4 uncommons in a pack. So it's not that hard to pull them. But reach basically allows you to block flying creatures which normally would fly overhead unless you also have flyers. So yeah, very useful. 4 mana total, it's a 4/4, and it has an ability that I find extremely useful for a lot of effects that frogs seem to have, which is enter the battlefield effects, or just enter effects. And it has an ability with 1 green blue to activate. Exile another target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a 1/1 counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So it is unfortunate that you can't do this at instant speed. That would make this quite powerful. But any card that allows you to just pay an amount of mana to exile something and return it to the battlefield, which is typically considered flicker or blink, especially when it's not at end of turn or like it happens there at that moment, they can be quite powerful and can be very easily abused. So, just as an example, if you had any creature that could tap for mana, we'll just say it can tap for mana equal to the number of creatures you control. If you have anything that's giving haste, that is another thing. You would have to have haste for this. But if you had anything that had haste, you could pay the tree, flicker that card, it enters the battlefield, you tap it, and say you have 5 creatures, it will generate 5 mana. Then you pay 3 of that mana into the frog, you flicker, it enters the battlefield, and if it has haste, you can tap it again, generate 5 mana, and you can just keep doing this over and over again. So right there, infinite mana, infinite combo.
It always fascinates me how you can figure that out so quickly.
I've just seen the abilities all before.
I suppose.
You get used to seeing infinite combos. Like when I'm building decks, I will look for 1 or 2 combos to put into it as a win condition. But it's also something that you kind of get very aware of when you play games with other people.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, okay, that deck just went infinite. Cool. I know to watch out for those cards in future. Especially like when we've played games with your deck and you have your Mind Crank.
My mill deck specifically.
Yes. And that has the ability of, if an opponent would lose life, they mill that many cards.
Yes.
And there's a lot of cards that basically say, if an opponent will mill a card, they lose a life.
Yeah.
You can see where this is going.
Yeah, it becomes a cycle.
And that's just a 2-card combo that all of a sudden, once you have 1 more card on the battlefield, you deal damage or mill a card, bang, everyone starts, basically everyone loses. You win there.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going off on a tangent. So yeah, in my opinion, Elite Splash Mentor, being able to pay 3 mana to exile and flicker, really good. So one card that could benefit from flicking any card is the next frog I want to talk about, which is Duer Port Mage, which is a 1 blue frog wizard creature. It is a rare. Whenever 1 or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card.
Ooh, leave without dying. So, as you said, flickering means they would be leaving the battlefield.
They leave the battlefield, and as we said earlier, dying means goes to graveyard.
Yes.
Exile doesn't count as dying.
That's true.
So, anytime you flicker a card, you will draw a card.
Does that also work on your commander returning to the command zone? Or does that technically count as dying?
When a commander would die, originally, the rules used to be that a commander would not go to the graveyard, so it wouldn't die.
Right.
So now the rule is whenever your commander would change zone, you can choose to return it to your command zone.
Yeah.
So going from the battlefield to the graveyard, it dying is changing zone, which means then you can return it to your command zone.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it does not work to your commander dying or leaving the battlefield from dying. But
shame.
Any other way your commander leaves the battlefield, yes. Return to hand, all that sort of stuff. Another great thing about this is it has it built in that you can pay 1 in a blue, tap, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand.
Ooh, that is good.
Returning to hand is once again leaving the battlefield.
Yep.
And it is a way that you can save a creature, or if someone targets something, goes to remove it, you can pay 2, tap it, bring it back to your hand.
Yeah, because it's specifically what you control, because there are cards that it might be forcing you to pick an opponent's creature, but the fact that, yes, this has a built-in ability that allows you to use its original ability works really, really well.
And this is the last frog I have on my list. Once again, synergy here is enters the battlefield.
Yes.
So I think personally, I think in standard and draft, frogs are going to be the more powerful option in this
That makes sense.
format. Also, I think they're pretty powerful in just for commander as well. But the next one is called Splash Splasher.
Interesting.
It is a little bit more expensive than some of the other cards we reviewed,
Mm-hmm.
which is 3 generic mana and a blue.
Okay.
It is uncommon creature frog wizard. It has offspring,
Oh, okay.
so another card with the offspring mechanic,
Yeah.
meaning you can pay an additional 1 and a blue, so it costs 6 total mana,
Mm-hmm.
and you will get a 1/1 token copy of Splash Slasher.
Great name.
Its ability is when this creature enters, tap up to one target creature and put a stun counter on it.
Mm-hmm.
Stun counters means if a creature would untap, you would remove a stun counter instead.
Mm-hmm.
So there's synergy there. Anything that gives stun counters works really well with proliferate decks that put more counters on something.
Yep.
So if you proliferate, it means put another counter of a counter already on a permanent.
You increase it by one. Basically.
Yeah, basically. And if something has a stun counter on it and you can proliferate each time, it means it stays tapped.
Yes.
This is an enter effect, so this is an ETB. So when it enters, tap a target creature, put a stun counter on it. The offspring token, when you create it, it enters the battlefield. So tokens are very easy to, again, populate. You can make multiples of them. You can keep making more. They enter the battlefield, doing more triggers, more stun counters. And again, the flicker that we had from before.
With Daraport Mage.
Well, Daraport Mage can be used by paying 2 to return to hand, but also the one before, which was
Lily Splash Mentor.
Yeah, paying 3 mana.
Yes.
You can pay 3 mana and it flickers. It leaves the battlefield, enters the battlefield. So if you had the other frog out, you draw a card, it enters the battlefield, put a stun counter on something. It is going to be a very controlling and synergistic.
Yeah, these 3 frogs work really well together.
It's actually kind of made me want to build a frog deck.
Yeah, I was just double checking
with Helga.
Well, that was the thing. I was just double checking Helga and Glarib's card wording, and while they don't work off of the, or at least as far as I can tell, they don't quite work off of the flicker mechanic. I do think that would be very good to have as commanders for a frog deck.
Well, the colors that Helga are in, which is white, blue, green.
Yeah.
White and blue is considered the best colors for any flicker ability.
That's true.
But white, blue, green will be the next best. Because in those colors, you have so many cards that have enter the battlefield effects.
Yes.
And in blue, you have so many cards that allow you to flicker cards, and white as well.
Yeah, it's true. Whereas Glarib being black, blue, green, not as adept at those mechanics.
It misses some of the really good cards that would be in white. It does kind of synergize well with Yarok, which is an elemental creature.
Yes.
That has the ability basically whenever something would enter the battlefield, if a trigger would be triggered from that, it triggers an additional time. So all these effects would happen twice with that card.
And it's not unusual with Commander to have a commander that is not necessarily hinging on the effect that your deck is built around.
Yeah, I'm going to be making an episode if people are interested. I'll be making it anyways, but
people can listen if they like.
Yeah, I'm going to be making an episode around building a commander deck and some key things to look out for, how to start it, how many certain things you need, and it'll be geared towards beginners and both intermediate players as well.
Yeah, because I consider myself an intermediate player, but I've never made a deck by myself.
Yeah, you'd be an intermediate player, but in terms of deck building,
complete noob.
Yeah, I unfortunately made use some very powerful decks that I come to regret. But, yeah, it'd be interesting when you on that episode as well. You'll be learning, hopefully.
Yes.
Actually, it might be good to go through building a deck together.
I think that's a good idea.
So that's something we're playing with and something to look forward to.
Yeah, let us know if you would be interested in that. We're going to make it anyways, but, engagement. So what's the next card on your list?
So the next card on my list is Patch Paw Recruit.
Okay.
I have the borderless art for
This
this.
is one of the rabbits.
It is.
Yeah.
Patch Power Crew is 1 green.
Single mana drop. We love those.
Absolutely amazing,
Mm-hmm.
especially in draft. Just having anything that can come out on the first turn is going to be really good. It does have Offspring 2.
Okay.
So if you were going to cast it for the Offspring cost, it's going to cost 3. So that makes it a little bit slower. But I think it will be an interesting effect because Patch Power Crew, I don't know if I said the other things, it is a Rabbit Warrior, it is rare, it is 2 power, 1 toughness. Offspring 2, as I said, Trample, and Trample is if it deals any damage in excess of destroying a creature, that damage will continue through.
To the player.
To the player, yes. That will be...
Hit them in the face, as you say.
That's kind of one of the evergreen effects. That's something you'll have to learn. We're not really going into that in this. Then, whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control other than that creature.
Ooh, okay.
So, if something gets targeted,
yes,
you're going to be putting a 1/1 counter on something. So, if you have an Offspring, you have 2 of those abilities on that trigger. If one thing gets targeted, you're going to get 2 1/1 counters on 2 other targets. It could be any. True. It could be on the same other creature, or it could be on 2 different other creatures. But they will both trigger off the one target on a creature. And because it's Offspring and it's in green, which is the most common color for tokens, there's ways of making a lot more of those tokens.
Yeah, and all of that kicks off at once.
Even just having 4 tokens means that one trigger is going to make something very strong.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's based off of the wording, because an important thing to note about Commander is a Commander deck has 100 cards. Your Commander and then the other 99. But one of the stipulations in that is there can be no repeats.
Yeah, what's called a singleton format. Every card must be a unique card.
Yeah.
Apart from basic lands, you can have any number of basic lands, basically.
Yeah. And this is antithesis to the standard format in which you are allowed a play set of any card, which is up to 4. And because of that play set mechanic, there are specific cards that will say that you can't, for example, in this case, add a counter to a card with the same name. However, based on the wording of this, if you have your Paw Patch Recruit and then your Paw Patch Recruit Offspring, they could add 1/1 counters to each other.
Well, they could anyways if they weren't, as long as they weren't targeted.
Right.
If they weren't a targeted card.
They're able to, if you have, like, say, 4 of these things going on at once because of the Offspring mechanic, you're able to build them all up synergistically.
Yeah. It also states that whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell or ability.
That's true.
Which means putting a 1/1 counter on target creature you control is being targeted by an ability. So if you do have multiple Paw Patch Recruits, you can chain them.
Yeah.
So each one is going to trigger. And then, so you target the first one, all of them are going to trigger. You target the second one, they're going to trigger. Target the third one, they're going to trigger.
That sounds like the beginning of a combo.
So, like rabbits do, it basically it breeds and
it just keeps
gets out of hand. It keeps going. So initially, when I read the card, I was like, I don't know, it's okay. And then the more I thought about it, and the more I read it, and the more I thought about what it does, I was like, oh, hang on.
And this is the thing about any new Magic set is the longer you kind of consider and mire in your own thoughts about these cards and see them actually played, the more we learn about the mechanics, the more we're able to put them to use. Sidebar, I love the art on Paw Patch Recruit.
It's amazing.
The Mace of Pine Cones is especially good.
I love it. Have to check it out.
The Flail of Pine Cones. Pardon me.
All the art of all these cards are absolutely fantastic.
It's excellent.
I love the design team and the artists they've got for this set. It's been honestly one of my favorite sets.
Bangers all around, honestly.
It's nostalgic for that kind of storybook and creature cartoons and stuff that you grew up with.
Rescue Rangers and the like.
Chippendale, yeah, all that.
Yeah.
Um, Basil the Mouse Detective, or Basil for you Americans.
No, it's Basil.
It's always Basil.
Basil.
It's just his name is Basil. Whether you say Basil or Basil, his name is Basil. Yeah, it's been a great set. I'm going to go through the last couple of cards now,
Yep.
and I'll be a little bit quicker with a few, but I'm going to kind of quick fire these.
Okay.
So we have one called Overprotect, which is an instant spell for 1 and a green, and it's another protection spell. It's fairly cheap. It only targets a single creature, so target creature you control gets +3/+3 and gains trample, hexproof, and indestructible until end of turn.
Whoa.
Yeah, so for 2 mana, it's basically an absolutely fantastic card to protect your commander.
That's amazing.
Having it in standard, I think, or in your draft, having multiple of these could actually win you a game.
Yeah.
Because, like, say you have 2 of them, or you cast it, that's +6/+6, trample, hexproof, and indestructible.
Hexproof meaning it cannot be targeted by spells. Indestructible meaning it cannot die to damage.
It cannot be destroyed.
Pardon me. Yes, it cannot be destroyed.
Yeah, straight away. That's, in my opinion,
That's insanely good.
It's a good card. That's an uncommon.
Wow. An uncommon?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So glad to see that. Then we have Peerless Recycling.
Raccoon.
This is another instant. It is a raccoon. The art is a raccoon.
We're learning, ladies and gentlemen.
So it is 1 green instant. It is another instance of gift a card. In this case, it's promise an opponent gift, which is them drawing a card as you cast it. And its ability is return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, which is always great. Getting a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand lets you reuse things. There's permanents that basically allow you to return instant cards to your hand and stuff. So when they enter, so this can potentially go infinite, especially if you gift the card, because then it says if the gift was promised, instead return 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to hand, and that's only for 1 and a green.
Is that also uncommon, or
that's also uncommon?
That's crazy good.
Yeah, I think.
What are they doing making that uncommon?
Recently, and I've seen this in Modern Horizons 3 as well. Recently, some of the strongest cards in these sets have been the commons and uncommons.
Wow.
Like, there's
the rarity hierarchy is getting all thrown out of whack.
I feel like there's less and less what was used to be called draft chaff, which is basically like every pack you had just really bad cards. Some cards that you just would never use.
Yeah.
The only time they would ever be used is in draft, but you would typically see, like, at the end of a draft game,
a bunch of cards just left.
Yeah, just behind. A pile of cards left on the table because they're terrible cards. They're never going to be used. The only time they were used, it was in the draft. So draft shaft. But we're seeing less and less of that. Still
That's
there.
Good.
Still there, but it's getting. They've gotten a lot better with that.
It also does mean, though, as we mentioned, that the prices for Magic cards, if you're buying them online, it's very much like a stock market. It also means that because it's uncommon, you're more likely to get it, which means the price of it, if you are specifically looking for it, is more likely to stay in that lower range.
It's much more accessible for players. It means that you can actually build fairly decent decks with just commons and uncommons with a few odd rares. But it's also why a format called Pauper is getting popular, which is basically you can only use cards that were printed in common. But
it's like the baby Pokemon League, but we'll touch on that a different time.
Yeah, it's not my favorite way to play, but it is very budget friendly for anyone wanting to get into Magic and not spending a lot most of the time. Next we have I'm not actually sure how to say this properly, but I think it's Cursication Mage. It is 1 and a red. It's an otter wizard. It has the offspring mechanic. We know what that does now.
Yep.
Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Burn.
Yeah. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell. So that's artifacts, instants, sorceries. And planeswalkers, actually.
Enchantments.
And enchantments, sorry, yeah.
There's plenty of them.
Yeah, it's not anything but a creature. Everything that's not a creature. Simple as. And Yeah, as we can imagine, with the offspring, you get tokens, you make more tokens. That means whenever you cast a non-creature spell, having more of these cards means you're going to deal a lot of damage.
Yep, it's a good one.
Next is a good staple. By the way, that I think I said it, but that was an Otter Wizard. It's a 2/2 uncommon again.
Mm-hmm.
Next card we have is another Otter, Stormcatch Mentor. It is a blue and a red. It is an Otter Wizard again. Creature, uncommon, once again, with some really good uncommons in this set.
Yep.
It has haste, always
Which
great.
means you can use it immediately.
You can attack with it immediately, and if it has an ability that would have to be, the card would have to be tapped for, you can do that straight away too.
Yeah, because normally you would have to wait at least one turn.
Yeah. So as we're seeing with otters, I think otters would be the second most viable strategy for draft.
Yeah, I would agree.
They like a lot of non-creature spells, basically. So they have that synergy of casting a lot of spells, low to the ground, so like not much mana, and very aggressive playstyle. So to help you with that and to benefit from it, we have this otter that has haste, has prowess, which mentioned before means non-creature spells give this creature +1/+1 until end of turn temporarily.
Which makes it beefier.
Yep. So like you cast 4 non-creature spells, it gets +4/+4 until end of turn. Then it has instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and it's a woman.
Ooh.
So having multiple of these, it doesn't have offspring, unfortunately. It's not that OP.
Oh my god, could you imagine?
But having multiple of these in standard or draft means that all your instances and sorcery spells are going to cost less. You can cast more spells, you can do more prowess, you can do more triggers like whenever you cast one creature spell, deal 1 damage.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Next, we actually have one of the Calamity Beasts.
Oh, which one?
This is a rare. Well, I say Calamity Beast is technically. I'm actually not sure if it is a Calamity Beast. It's not legendary or anything, but
it is Bassooned Green Shell, which is an elemental turtle. And the reason we're not entirely sure if this is a Calamity Beast, I think it probably is, because looking at the Calamity Beast cards, ones we know that definitely are, such as Maha, they are all elemental in addition to whatever their creature type
but they're
is.
typically legendary.
The bigger ones are typically legendary, but they're also notably animals that are not part of the main animal folks that we see.
The only thing I'll say though is they tend to be predators.
And turtle does not quite factor in there.
I mean, it eats fish, I guess.
Anyway.
I would never call a turtle a predator, but it does eat.
It's a snapping turtle.
It eats insects. I probably would eat a mouse. I don't know.
We'll see.
Anyways, I think this is a good card for a type of strategy in Commander called Landfall, or just lands.
Oh, yes.
So anything that has land synergy or synergizes with lands entering the battlefield.
Which, as we mentioned, land is where your mana comes from.
Yeah, and green which this card is, has a lot of land synergy. So I think this could be very good because, okay, I'll read out the card anyways. So Bassooned Green Shell is 3 green. It is an elemental turtle, like we mentioned. It is a rare, has reach, once again, very good, especially in draft.
I question how it has reach.
Well, the art shows it like shooting things from its shell, which has flowers on it.
Oh, fair enough.
Or plants. So I'm assuming it must shoot whatever's flying down.
Sure.
That's the only way I can imagine it has reach. Elemental turtle, it is 4/6, so 4 power, 6 toughness. So that's called a big butt. Whenever something has a high toughness, we say big butt. As long as you control 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2. So anything that gives all your creatures a boost is called an anthem effect. So that's a very powerful anthem. +2/+2 for everything. And 10 or more lands, it does sound like a really mammoth task to achieve. But in green, getting a lot of lands is not that hard. To be honest, by the time you've cast this, you probably are only on turn 2 because you've already ramped that much.
Probably.
But to help you along, and get those lands, it also has whenever Festoon Green Shell or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it into the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, put it into your hand. So basically, it's ramp or draw.
Yeah.
It's
two very good strategies.
Which is, in my opinion, very powerful. It does benefit from a deck specifically with a higher toughness. So, like, if your deck is built around having a big butt, for example, there's cards that allow you to deal damage equal to toughness. There's nothing like that in draft or standard at the moment, but
yeah, this to me strikes me as a card that will work best removed from the Bloomburrow set.
Yeah,
you can slot it into pre-existing decks pretty well.
Yeah, it's not a bad card to have.
No, not at all.
In a draft game or anything like that, but it is definitely going to do a lot better in the commander format, I think.
Yeah.
Especially in one of my decks, which is built around having big butts. That means every single one of those cards is going to be ramp or card draw for me.
Say butts again.
Butts.
All right, next.
Okay. Now we have Tender Wild Guide. And this is a 1 and a green. It is a creature. This is the first creature we have of this type, which is a possum.
Oh, I didn't realize there were possums.
Yeah. So this is a bit of an outlier. It's not
kind of like weasel and badger.
Or main kins, I guess.
Yeah.
So it is a possum druid. It is a rare. Again, offspring 2. So normally it's 1 green. It will cost 4 if you cast it for its offspring cost.
Yep.
Tap, add 1 mana of any color. Fairly handy. It's an early game, what's called a mana dork. So any creature that generates mana is referred to as a mana dork.
So unkind.
I'm actually not sure where that term comes from, but that's the way it was always referred to.
There are so many terms in Magic that.
Oh, it's its own language.
Yeah.
Like, so much slang.
My favorite being, it's such and such a card on a stick.
Yeah. And the counterpart to the mana dorks are what's called mana rocks,
which is an artifact that generates mana.
So mana rocks and mana dorks, very good cards to have in your deck. They will ramp you, and ramp, as we mentioned, it means you have more mana than you typically would have. So you can do more powerful effects quicker.
Yep.
But, like we said, this has the added benefit of offspring. So that means you have 2 things that can put either a 1/1 counter on a creature, or on this creature specifically, or just generate mana. So if you don't need the mana, it actually can get stronger. And once you make an offspring token, it can make more. So populate, get more tokens out, generate a lot of mana. It's
also incredibly cute to look at.
It is so cute.
It's very cute.
It has one of the cuter offspring tokens. Very hard to get, but
I bet.
I absolutely love its token. All right, next we have Beauregard Mentor. We have a Rabbit Soldier creature, and it is green-white. It is an uncommon. It has trample, and like rabbits tend to do and breed a lot, they have a lot of tokens.
Does offspring again?
It does not actually have offspring.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm quite thankful for, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Because Beauregard Mentor's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control.
Oh, yep.
So when you're breeding like rabbits and you have a lot of rabbits, or just a lot of creatures on the battlefield, this thing is going to be quite tough, quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, simple and common. I think it's a very good card.
That's very good.
Going on to our next card, which is a rare. We're back to the otters.
Great.
This one does have offspring.
Okay.
And we'll get into it. So, Thundertrap Trainer. It is a 1 and a blue.
Another early game.
Yep, another early game. Otter Wizard, rare. It's a 1/2, so 1 power, 2 toughness.
Mm-hmm.
But has offspring 4.
Oh, okay. So it would be 6.
Yeah, 4
total.
Is quite high for offspring cost.
Yeah.
6 total. When this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library.
Mm-hmm.
you may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. So once again, you're looking for non-creature spells, that kind of thing, instants and
Instant sorceries.
things that others want, or these colors want, but others want in Bloomburrow.
Yep.
And then you put the rest of the cards in the bottom of your library in a random order. So because this has offspring,
You're doing that twice.
if you cast it, you're doing it twice. And again, blue has a lot of ways of making tokens of creatures. So yeah, you're able to make tokens, use that ability multiple times. So I think that has potential. We're going on to Kindle Spark Duo, our next card, which is a Lizard Otter. So there's a series of cards in Bloomburrow which are called Duo. It'll be a monocolor, but it's a monocolor card that can go into either a lizard strategy or an otter strategy.
In this case, there are other ones that's like a frog and a rabbit, or a mouse and a bat, that type of vibe.
Yeah, so there's a few duo cards, but I thought this one was really interesting because I've only seen this mechanic once or twice before, and I know it's pretty powerful in the decks that use it. So this is just another version of it.
Yeah.
So Kindle Spark Duo is 2 in a red. It is a lizard auto. It is a lizard otter.
Yeah.
Tap. Kindle Spark Duo deals 1 damage to target opponent.
Okay, burn, as we saw before.
Yep. So these kind of decks, they cast really low mana spells. They do what's called like ping damage, which is like little bits of damage here and there. But like the best way to put it is death by a million cuts.
Yeah, that I think is that.
And one of the things it does is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap Kindle Spark Duo.
Ooh, there goes that synergy again.
Yeah, so when you're casting non-creature spells, you're untapping it, you tap it, deal damage, untap it,
yeah,
cast a spell, and keep going. So big synergy there. Bark Form Harvester, next card, is interestingly enough an artifact creature, which is one of the few that we have.
Yes, it's not a very common thing in this set.
No, it is 3 mana, just 3 generic mana. Artifacts typically you can cast any mana to cast them, use any mana to cast them. And this is Bark from Harvester, artifact creature, shapeshifter.
Oh, I remember this card now, yes.
Which is a very interesting type, because typically shapeshifters have an ability called Changeling, and this card is no different. Changeling means that this card is every creature type.
Which means you can put it into any deck, and it should work.
Yeah, in any kindred deck, it will count as a creature of that type.
Yeah, so in the context of Bloomburrow, it could be an otter, a bat, a rabbit, whatever you need it to be.
Whatever you need it to be, it will fit into your deck. I think it's going to benefit most squirrels.
It's a squirrel in the art, right?
It's a squirrel thing in the art, yes.
It's like a messed up scarecrow type.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it has Changeling, it's every creature type, it has Reach. Once again, very good to have in the draft format and in general.
Yeah.
And it has 2, just pay 2 mana, put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library.
Okay.
So, I mean, with squirrels and stuff like that, they typically put a lot of stuff into your graveyard.
Or
like anything that puts a lot of stuff in your graveyard. It means you could, it's just basically returning cards from your graveyard. It's useful if, for example, an opponent goes to exile your graveyard and you want something, you still want something out of that.
Or if you have a card that allows you to search for a specific card out of your library and then shuffle.
Yeah. So if you are able to shuffle your deck, it means you just shuffle it into your deck. And if you can search for the card that you got from your graveyard, even better. There is a few select decks that do benefit from playing from the bottom of your deck.
Topping from the bottom, if you will.
It is a very interesting mechanic that I haven't really looked much into, but if you're running one of those type of decks, it could be useful.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So we're down to the last 2 kind of just overlooked cards, in my opinion. And then I'm going to talk about a new series of cards, which will be quick enough on that, and two cards that I think could be interesting commanders to build around.
Yep.
Next one is Darsight, which is 2 and a black. It's a sorcery. It has Surveil 2, which to surveil, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, then put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest on the top of your library in the order. So it's scry, but you put it into your graveyard. It's actually very powerful for any decks that want things in the graveyard. Then you draw 2 cards. So if you like the cards, great, you draw them. If you don't like the cards, you can draw 2 different cards if they go into your graveyard. And then you lose 2 life, which is a little bit of a downside. There's plenty of other cards that have this effect, but this is another name. It's a different name for this card. I don't believe this was ever printed before, Darsight. I could be wrong. But it just means that you have an additional card in Commander that you can play. It also is going to be very useful in the limited format and in draft. And then just a very simple card. There's been plenty of these. It, once again, is another named card that can do this. So for Commander players, it means you have another option. And if you're drafting, it is going to be a very useful card to have. It's called 3-Tree Root Weaver. Again, with the Irish trying to pronounce this. It is 1 in a green. It is a creature, Mole Druid. It has 1 tree, so it has that big butt. And it has tap, add 1 mana of any color. So,
good.
Really good. It's a mole, which isn't a part of the main.
Yeah, it's another outlier.
Yeah, so any of the outliers, typically they're designed to go into a deck.
They're kind of complementary.
Yeah, so any deck that runs green could technically use it. But yeah, it's just another option to have 1 mana of any color. So there we go.
Excellent.
All right, so the next part I want to talk about is basically the new series of cards that came in, which is the Seasons, which are a series of 5 sorcery cards.
There's 1 per mana color, right?
Yeah, they are. I think they're all sorceries, aren't they?
Yes, they are all sorceries.
So yeah, there's 1 for each color. So there's Season of Burrow, which is white.
And then we also have Season of Loss, which is black. Season of Gathering, which is green. Season of the Bowl, which is red, and Season of Weaving, which is blue.
Yeah, these are all very powerful, by the way.
Yeah.
There's no bad version of the Seasons.
No, it's similar mechanics. They all just do different things relating to their main color.
Yeah, there is some that are better than others. But if you see a season, especially if you're drafting, if you see a season, get that card. Grab that. They're all good. So yeah, the first one I'm going to talk about are the one that I like the most, just because I have use for it. But the one I'm talking about here in particular is the Season of the Burrow, which, as we mentioned, is a sorcery. 3 white. They are mythic rare, so they are difficult to get.
Yeah.
They typically are going to have a higher price tag if you're buying them single as well.
Yes.
But we will see how that fluctuates in the future. Each of the seasons have a mechanic which is basically pause.
Yeah. Does this have an official terminology yet?
I think it does, but I just don't.
Yeah. When we say pause, we mean there is an icon on the card that is paw shaped.
Yeah. PAWS, pause. Yeah. Each one says choose up to 5 pause worth of modes. You may choose the same mode more than once. All of them have the same thing, which is there will be an ability that has 1 paw, an ability that has 2 paws, and an ability that has 3 paws. I believe they're all the same.
Yes.
Okay. So for the Season of the Burrow, we have, for 1 paw, create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. Which means, okay, so this is 5 mana, which means you can choose up to 5 paws worth of modes, which means for 5 mana, you can create 5 1/1 rabbit tokens. So a 1-for-1 typically is very powerful in Magic. So like 1 mana for 1 token is typically good. 1 mana for 1 draw is typically good, and like 1 mana for 1 counter, maybe not as good, but can be okay. So getting 5 rabbit tokens for 5 mana is, in my opinion, very decent. It triggers enter the battlefield effects, like so 5 times for each one entering. If you have synergy for amount of creatures on the battlefield, it is just a quick way of getting a lot of things up. There's 2 pause, which is exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. So the only other card, like the card that exiles target non-land permanent, is 4 mana, which is Other End. So 4 mana to exile target non-land permanent for 4 mana. And then the next one is 3 mana, which is Anguished Unmaking. Both of these cards are black, white in color, by the way.
But because of the way these seasons work, you can use this 2 paw ability twice
Yes, and get a token.
and get a token. So you're left over paw.
So for 5 mana, and this is just white, you can exile 2 target non-land permanents, and its controller draws a card, which is not that bad of a downside. The Anguish Unmaking had a downside for 3 mana, which was you took 3 damage, if I remember correctly. There is a card that exiles a creature for 1 mana, 1 white mana, and that's only a creature, but it draws from a card as well. This is way more versatile in the fact that it is a non-land permanent, which means enchantments, creatures, artifacts, planeswalkers, anything that sticks on the battlefield is a permanent.
Yep.
Yeah, that's honestly, in my opinion, very powerful. And then for 3, you can return target permanent card with a mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it.
There's that flicker we were talking about.
It is not quite flicker, but it is bringing something back that either died or you sacked something. Again, as I said before, just cards that when they enter the battlefield, you can return instants or sorceries from the graveyard to your hand, that sort of stuff. So they're built into Season of Burrow. You have a way of potentially recurring it.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, this can be a very powerful card. And yeah, you can return target permanent, mana value 3 or less from the graveyard, indestructible counter on it. That's great. But then you can also make 2/1/1 rabbits, or you can choose to exile a non-land permanent.
It's a very versatile card.
It's extremely versatile. It's never really going to be a dead card in your hand, which is why it's so powerful, because
Yeah.
no matter what, you're going to probably get some use out of it in some way.
Yeah. Now, Season of the Burrow, as you mentioned, is 5 mana.
Yeah.
And the majority of the seasons are 5 mana. So, for example, Season of the Bold and Season of Lost, they are also 5 mana, which is 3, and then 2 of the required color, so black and red. However, Season of Gathering and Season of Weaving are 6 mana, 4 generic, and then 2 of either green or blue, depending on which one
Okay,
you're
I thought
playing.
they're all 5.
No, these 2 have a higher converted mana cost.
Out of the seasons, is there one that particularly stands out to you?
I think they are all very versatile depending on what you need them for. So, for example, Season of the Weaving, which is the blue card, for 1 paw, it's draw a card.
And is this 5 mana?
This is 6.
This one's 6, yeah.
This is 6. But still, 6 mana, draw 5 cards. Not horrendous if that's what you want to use it for.
That's fairly good, yeah. 5 cards for 6 mana.
2 paws, choose an artifact or creature you control, create a token that is a copy of it.
Wow, that's very good.
That's very good. And again, you can do that up to 2 times.
So that combined with Offspring,
Mm-hmm.
any of the frog abilities.
Yep. And then for 3, return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand, which is a board wipe of sorts.
Okay, yeah.
So for 6 mana, you can do that, plus create copy tokens, which
the tokens aren't going to get sent back.
Exactly.
So if you're doing this in combination with Offspring and frogs that have a bunch of tokens or anything like that,
it works really well. So I think Season of the Weaving is definitely one to look out for.
that is, yeah, that's very powerful. It's not quite a Cyclonic Rift. Cyclonic Rift is each non-land permanent that you don't control.
Yeah.
Or your opponent's non-land. permanents, but yeah.
Season of Loss is also one that I think is good because it has a potentially a built-in win con.
Okay.
So this is the black card, and this does cost 5.
Oh, black blue. Yeah.
Mm.
They're your favorites.
So 1, each player sacrifices a creature.
Okay.
Again, do that up to 5 times.
Actually, thinking about that.
Mm.
So each player,
including you.
Yeah, including you. But the colors that do that are blue black, blue green not so much, blue red not so much,
Black green.
Black green, black red. Every color that has black in it basically has some
Can
synergy,
benefit from this, yeah.
has basically some synergy of things going into your graveyard or sack triggers. So
Yeah.
sacking 5 things, yeah, that's so powerful.
So that's number 1. 2, draw a card for each creature you control that died this turn.
For 2?
Mm-hmm.
Which means you could pay that technically twice and still sack, each player sacks the creature. I mean, by itself, I think the best way of playing that card would be to activate that ability once and then sack 3 creatures.
Well, let's move on to number 3, which is each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard.
Yeah, so if you have multiple of these, it's pretty powerful. But I mean, if you're in Commander and your deck is built around this, this is
keeping this in mind with what we know. If we're looking purely at Bloomburrow, this works well with bats and squirrels.
Rats.
Rats, pardon me, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, because rats surveil, I think they're all about.
Yeah.
I remember because they're about putting things into the graveyard, milling.
It also, of the seasons, has my favorite art.
Yeah,
it's just very
on
cool.
all of them are actually very.
Yeah, but I think all of the season cards are good. I just think Seasons of Weaving and Season of Loss are 2 to definitely look out for, in addition to Season of the Burrow.
Which makes sense. I thought the green Season of
Gathering.
Yeah, I thought Season of Gathering was going to be my favorite, honestly. And it is very powerful, but I just feel like I can do more with Season of Burrow.
It's the most versatile, I think. The others are they're very much geared towards specific mechanics.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to highlight those. And the last thing is a couple of commanders that I think will be very interesting to build around in the future.
One of which is a character we've already touched on.
Yes, so I will talk about him first, actually. One of the creatures I think would be a very good commander if you're looking to get into Commander or looking to just build a new Commander deck is Gev, Scaled Scorch. And we learned of Gev from our little story time with Hannah.
Yep, one of our Stripes Rapscallions.
If you enjoyed the overview, or if you did read the story yourself and dived with any of the characters, each of the characters do have a card, so you could build decks around them. But what Gev Scaled Scorch does is, well, one, he is black-red, so he's extremely easy to cast as your commander.
Mm-hmm.
He comes in early game. He's legendary creature, which to be your commander, he has to be legendary. Lizard Mercenary, so great for if you want to do a Lizard Kindred deck. He has Ward, pay 2 life. So if an opponent's spell or ability would target Gev, they have to pay 2 life to actually follow through. Not really something you want to be doing in Standard because you only have 20 life in Standard.
Whereas in Commander, you have 40.
In Commander, you have 40. So to be fair, paying 2 life is a little bit easier and not as big of a hurdle to, say, paying extra mana or something like that, or discarding a card or sacrificing whatever, which many other cards would have. But it is still a form of protection and kind of keeps it safe. But it having a ward isn't really the important part. What I think is very interesting on this is other creatures you control enter with an additional 1/1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. So if this deck is built around pinging, which is dealing small amounts of damage, death by 1,000 cuts, that means that if typically in a multiplayer game, which has 4 players, can have more, can have less, typically creatures are entering the battlefield with 3 additional 1/1 counters on them. So that already is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But also, whenever you cast a lizard spell, Gev, Scaled Scorch, deals 1 damage to target opponent. So if it is a Lizard Kindred deck and you're casting a lot of Lizard spells, it means that you're more likely to be dealing damage to everyone. And there's a lot of cards in Magic the Gathering from other sets that benefit from dealing exactly 1 damage or like the benefits from small creatures and small amounts of damage. So it can stack up very nice. And I can see this being a very low to the ground aggressive deck, which doesn't look very threatening, but like accumulates and ends up
It's
defeating
to
your opponents out of nowhere.
yeah, it's to lure your opponent into a false sense of security.
Honestly, yeah. I if I seen this on the board or across from me in the command zone, I probably wouldn't think too much of it. I'd be looking at it going,
And by the
okay,
time you are thinking about it, it's already too late.
yeah. By the time it's actually it's doing its thing, it probably has too many components to try and unravel it at that point, unless you can board wipe. So yeah, I think will be interesting to build around in the future. And the next commander I'm going to talk about is one that will be beneficial to your otters.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that spell slinging, casting spells for very little mana, getting benefits from casting non-creature spells. And I think we mentioned this card earlier, but if we didn't, it's Alania or Alania, the Divergent Storm. It is 3 blue red, legendary creature, otter wizard. It is a rare. It is 3/5. Again, the toughness being bigger than the power synergy with some certain cards. Whenever you cast a spell, if it's the first instant spell, the first sorcery spell, or the first otter spell, other than Alania, you've cast this turn, you may have target opponent draw a card. If you do, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy.
Mm.
So essentially, when you're casting all your spells, you can, for the first time of that type, you can choose to have an opponent draw a card. You can split that up to each opponent, so you're not giving one opponent a major advantage. If you do the other effects of first instant force sorcery and first otter, copying spells is an extremely powerful ability.
Yeah.
So there's already a lot of infinite combos with any spells that copy a spell. So if you're copying a spell that copies a spell, then that copy can copy the spell that's copied. It gets
Oh
complicated.
no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Yeah, it can get complicated, but basically that means that each of those spells are getting copied and cast and copied. Oh, sorry, copied. Copy and casting are 2 different triggers. But there's a lot of cards that will say whenever you copy a spell or cast a spell, do X.
Yeah. And not for nothing, this is something that you learn after like witnessing a lot of different magic card sets coming and going. If there is a card that references another creature by name, you know they're likely going to work well together. So here we have Alania, Divergent Storm, but there is also an otter creature card called Alania's Pathmaker.
Okay. I actually didn't know this.
Yeah, which is when Alania's Pathmaker enters, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card.
Okay.
And that will work with Alania.
Yeah, I mean,
so
it gives you more cards to work with.
So when a named character gets referenced in multiple cards, you know they're probably a good one to keep an eye out for.
That's true. The thing about this though is, so copy spells are powerful, but they're one-off effects normally.
Yeah.
You use it, it goes to the graveyard, or it gets exiled, whatever the case is. But this is a card that is sitting in your command zone. This is a card that you can cast from your command zone at any point and just has a straight up, you don't have to put any more mana into it. It's if you would cast your first instant sorcery or first otter spell other than Alania, you may have target opponent draw a card, and then you can copy it.
Yep.
If the only downside is that you have an opponent draw a card, it is an extremely abusable effect. The other thing about this is it says any spell, any instant or sorcery that you cast this turn. As we already know, instant spells, for example,
Yep.
can be cast on anyone's turn. And if you're in a deck that has this low cost,
Which
so,
others tend to be by the looks of it.
which means every turn you can trigger this effect. If, for example, you do have any effects that are causing your opponents to take damage for drawing cards or anything like that, which could synergize around this deck, stuff like Niv Mizz's decks kind of do. Nekasar, who is black, blue, red, which is the same colors. It would mean that Nekasar would have to be the commander, but it's another ability that would cause an opponent to draw a card, meaning they are going to take damage, which is one of Nekasar's abilities. So you can turn this downside of this card into an actual strategy and benefit, making it that your opponents are going to lose life when they draw cards.
Yep, there's definitely a lot of different ways for this to work.
I've always been looking for a red blue deck to build, and I was never really a big fan of the kind of spell slinger style decks. But this just sounds really fun and powerful, and I really want to build around it.
I also really like the quote that is attached to the standard art of Alania.
Oh yes, why would I chase the storm? Does the cloud chase the rain? Does the sun chase the light?
I love that.
It's really good.
Again, even though she's not a character that factored into the story that we read earlier, you can get so much of that personality through those quotes.
So a bit of lore that we didn't actually touch on with otters is basically there's a lot of otters who are, I think they're called storm seekers.
Yes, we've seen that in a couple of outer cards.
So otters typically follow calamities very closely, and they're basically storm chasers in
real life.
World.
Twisters in cinemas now.
Yeah, like people who chase after tornadoes and all that sort of stuff. They're basically that, and that's just what they do, and they spend their time, chasing storms and getting thrills from it. So it's fun to see the kind of references to that in both ability and flavor. And flavor being anything that adds
anything
to
additional to a card.
Yeah, anything additional to a card that just adds or synergizes with the lore that happens. Is there any of the new cards that you think could be an interesting commander? Like,
I think that any of the main characters from the story could be used as good commanders. Mabel, for example. Other mice you control get +1/+1. When Mabel, heir to Cragflame, enters, create Cragflame, a legendary colorless equipment artifact token with equipped creature gets +1/+1, vigilance, trample, and haste with equip cost 2, which is again the sword that we mentioned that she has in the story. I think that's a really nice one, it's nice flavor for the character, but that as soon as she comes in, you get the sword.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that the fact that she works well with mice and her whole thing is gathering people around her works really well. Looking at characters that are not central to the story, we touched on Mira, Trash Technician, already. We explained why we think that she would be a good commander. But there was also one of the squirrel cards. I believe her name is Camilla. The Seed Miser. First of all, great art in all of her iterations. Love that. She has Menace, which means that 2 creatures are required to block her. Other squirrels you control have Menace.
Oh wow, that's very good.
Whenever you sacrifice 1 or more foods, create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token.
So that synergizes really well with Forage.
Yep. And speaking of, pay 2, Forage, put a 1/1 counter on each other squirrel you control. I think she's going to be abused as a squirrel commander.
Oh yeah, that's extremely powerful.
So keep an eye out for Camilla.
Wow, I wonder does that actually replace Chatterfang?
Chatterfang being the long-standing squirrel commander.
Yeah, unaware. Yeah, Chatterfang is not a part of this set in any way.
No, but as we established, squirrels have been around for a while.
Squirrels are a bit of a meme, actually.
They're a bit.
But yeah, the only real squirrel commander we've had all this time has been Chatterfang, who is a very powerful card. It basically generates if you would create one or more tokens, create that many scroll tokens as well. So yeah, like if you make 5 rabbit tokens, for example, you will also make 5 scroll tokens.
Yeah.
So Chatterfang has been amazing. I think, yeah, she might actually replace Chatterfang.
As one supreme falls, another rises.
Like Chatterfang would do really well in the deck.
Yes.
But
in the 99, as we say.
I think I have to build a scroll deck now.
I think you just might. And I think with that,
and an auto deck.
I think with that, that's a really good place to end our Bloomburrow discussions.
Yeah, and I think that is a good place to end today's episode. So thank you for joining us today on our discussion about Bloomburrow. Please let us know what you think of the cards we discussed, what you thought of the story, if you're new to Magic, anything like that. We are interested in hearing that, and we'll try to respond to everyone we can for now. Next week's episode, we'll be discussing Hoy versus New Game, Zenithon Zero, and our thoughts on gameplay, story, characters, that sort of thing. So please tune in for that.
Please also be sure to follow us on all of our social media at Irish Nerdcast. The only thing we're not currently on is TikTok. Also, keep an eye out on our Twitch channel for any upcoming streams. We don't currently have a set schedule in place, but once we do, it will be posted on the channel and all of our social media.
And we're really looking forward to discussing with everyone there.
Yeah.
It'll be fairly chill, but we look forward to it. And with that, I'm JoJo.
I'm Hannah.
Thanks for listening.
Slán the fall.
Thank you very much for listening to episode 1. Please give us a follow on all our social medias, and we look forward to seeing you in episode 2.